This agreement creates a new political entity, and it deserves a name that symbolizes and honors the struggles of our forebears in Mindanao and celebrates the history and character of that part. We are doing everything to ensure that other Bangsamoro stakeholders are brought into this process so that this peace can be claimed and sustained by all. Sovereignty resides in the people.
In the village of the soldiers claimed troops were fired in the village primary.
Various movements have started the international community, from the Achinese GAM, Bangladesh Bengali, Moro National Liberation Front, and their de facto Moro Islamic Liberation Front, to the relentless approach of the Argentinians and the British to the Malvinas. But why has it led to violence?
During the last 3 decades, the world stood witness of unprecedented maelstrom of political development, from substantial growth of ethnic groups seeking political autonomy.
I understand that there are a lot of Filipino Mujahideen who are actually veterans.
So I met them also. Some of them, I met them in Pakistan and also in Afghanistan.
Mga tao gaya ni Commander Yakya ang kaharap ngayon ng mga sundalo ng gobyerno. Sila ang kadre na nagbibigay buto sa MILF. Ang kanilang mga natutunan ang nagiging bala ngayon laban sa mga nakakalamang na kanyon, tangke at eroplano ng gobyerno.
The process began almost as soon as nation self-determination was advanced as the new principle of international legitimacy after 1918. It involved first equating the popular principle of sovereignty with the attack on the remaining dynastic empires in Europe, and later with anti-colonialism generally. Secondly, it involved abandoning the constitutional code of settling disputed claims in favor of political settlements. Although the American and Soviet governments have refused to commit themselves openly in support of nationalist movements whose aims is to secede from an existing state, their ideological rivalry has often led them to encourage ethnic separatism covertly and manipulatively. In such cases, their motive is presumably to weaken the other side of secure a short-run tactical advantage in their own power political struggle. As we have already noted, Soviet support for the principle of national self-determination has always been primarily tactical. So it was a matter of the little surprise that they supported the Eritrean struggle before the Ethiopian revolution and withdrew their support afterwards. Similarly, at the height of the Sino-Soviet dispute, which was also a period of close relations between China and Pakistan, the Soviet allegedly supported the Balochi nationalists in their insurgency, but took care to stop, well short of encouraging them to press their cause to the point of secession from Pakistan. The Americans also frequently encouraged separatist movements as a way of obtaining leverage in their global diplomacy. One of the clearest examples is provided by the support which the Shah of Iran and the Americans together provided to the Kurdish rebellion in Iraq. Subnational independence movements of the Muslims and Achinese in the Philippines and in Indonesia, both started as peaceful struggles for political autonomy and later developed into an armed and violent movement for independence when the state misunderstood the core issues involved in their quest of autonomy and treated the movement as a disruptive force to sow chaos. The state learned the painful lesson when its high-handed approach, using the military, fanned the fires of rebellion and transformed it from simply an autonomous into a separatist movement. The ethnic content of the struggle was trivialized and underestimated the movement's capability to arouse, organize, and mobilize ethnic and minority groups to challenge the awesome power of the state.
Nang mapasok ng Marines ang Camp Kitanhan, lalo pang sumindi ang labanan. Sa taas ang tingin! Sa taas! 60! Kaya pumasok na sa eksena ang mga tangke para magbigay ng firepower.
The Moro and Aceh separatist movements in the Philippines and Indonesia, respectively, have generally alarmed other countries in South Asia confronted with similar problems, especially in Thailand with Patani Malays and Myanmar with Karen, and to a certain extent in Malaysia after the 1999 electoral gains of Kelantan and Terengganu, which were aligned with the fundamentalist Partai Islam. These states were anxious that the contagion would affect the security and stability of their respective countries and by logical extension, the entire region. The concern of other countries in the region is understandable. Given the sheer size of Indonesia in terms of population, the violence spawned by the conflict between the state and the separatist movement, political and social instability in this country can easily be felt by their neighbors, especially Singapore, Malaysia, and Australia. Through en masse migration of political, social, and economic reasons. Likewise, the continuing political insecurities in Mindanao may disturb and generate rippling effects. In Malaysia, the long-standing Karen's movement for a separate state in Myanmar could extend the conflict in the northern eastern part of Thailand and northern Laos. The cases of independence movements in the Philippines and Indonesia have shown that the conflict was a result of bad governance in the countries concerned. The formation of MNLF and MILF on one hand and GAM on the other hand was a consequence of the centralism of the state, skewed concept and process of nation and the state building. Moreover, the doggedness of the conflict is similar a function of unsatisfied political and economic interests of contending parties or unfulfilled commitments of either of the protagonists bound by an agreement negotiated and bargained earlier. The case also exhibited that issues advanced by separatist movements are negotiable and never absolute, and this can be addressed with the confines of the state's political framework. MNLF and JAM independence movements sparked because of what they perceive to be the state's institutionalized prejudice and discrimination, rightly or wrongly, against the people, considered as different from their majorities. Unlike MNLF, whose formation was triggered by military atrocities, JAM's birth was a result of deep hatred against the dominance of the Javanese in practically all aspects of Indonesian affairs. This is revealed in the 1976 Aceh Sumatra Declaration of Independence that he signed as head of state.
Pinanood nyo ho ba yung makasaysayang signing po sa Malacanang kanina?
Kanina.
Oh, needless to say, did you feel left out, Chairman?
Hindi naman. Ang katunayan ay kami ay natutuwa. Dahil sa aming pananaw, ito ay pinaka-importanting victory ng Bangsamoro. Not victory of MILF, no. Victory ng Bangsamoro as a whole.
Hence, secessionist movement is a consequence of the state's failure to make it more relevant and responsive to the fundamental needs and demands of people who collectively have a stake on the future of the nation. In other words, one way to maintain and uphold regional security, and stability is by not keeping silent over the political crisis being confronted by neighboring countries, that is invoking the policy of non-intervention into the affairs of a sovereign state. Instead, it is by serving a mediator or good office to contending parties willing to resolve their conflict in an amiable manner. The other is to prevent or restrain separatism in their country through better governance and promotion of the democratic rule rather than the use of the military and consolidating state unity.